Jimmy Page started the famous band Led Zeppelin and was its main inspiration. He is famous for both his catchy guitar riffs and electrifying live shows, and he is also the main character in a dark, strange, and controversial story. There are rumors that this story is full of occult practices, deals with the devil, and a deadly curse that followed the band. From the very beginning, magical forces shaped Led Zeppelin in a way that few people were brave enough to face. Page's obsession with mystical practices, strange symbols, and hidden rituals turned Led Zeppelin from a rock band into a cultural icon that was always beset by tragedy and bad luck. But were these rumors that had no truth to them? Or was there really something scary following people who tried to enter Jimmy Page's world? Join us as we look into the scary lies, strange links, and terrible events that have created the scariest curse in rock music history. Also, more seriously, ask yourself, is it all just a coincidence, or did Jimmy Page make a deal with the forces he so bravely called upon that can't be broken? Beginnings. When Jimmy Page was born in West London on January 9, 1944, there were signs that he would have a very special life. Page's early life seemed pretty normal. He was the son of a personnel manager and a doctor's secretary. But by chance, something happened that changed his path forever. In their new home in Epsom, Surrey, the family found an old Spanish guitar that looked like it was just waiting for the right person to pick it up and play it well. The guitar had no clear origin, but to young Jimmy, it seemed like a strange gift from God. When a family friend who liked to play music on the side noticed Jimmy's interest in the guitar, he knew the boy had talent. Keyboard lessons from him for Page, getting people into the world of music. Early on, Page taught himself how to play, and then an amazing thing occurred. Within a few short years of his first lessons on the old guitar, Page quickly surpassed his peers, becoming an amazing guitarist even as a teenager after dropping out of school. He was motivated by his strong love of music and the support of those around him. As a young man, Jimmy Page worked as a session player in London. The city was in the middle of a big change in music in the 1960s, and Page quickly became famous. He worked with famous bands like The Who, The Kinks, and the Rolling Stones because of how talented he was. The British music scene quickly made Page one of the most sought-after session players. What, though, made a boy with an old Spanish guitar become one of the best musicians ever? From the first steps he took on his musical journey, Page was on a one-of-a-kind path that led to both great success and hidden tragedies and secrets. Early life events like learning to play the guitar on his own and quickly rising in the music business helped Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin build a strong base. They were also the start of the strange and sad events that would follow him around for the rest of his life. There are spiritual and occult secrets. Jimmy Page was a famous artist, but he was also very interested in and maybe even obsessed with magical and mystical things. This interest was much more than just a curiosity. It had a big effect on Page's life and led him to explore spirituality and magic in ways that few people tried. An important link in Page's life was his friendship with Aleister Crowley, a famous and controversial magician. People often called Crowley the wickedest man in the world. His brave teachings, which pushed for complete freedom and rejecting all social rules with the motto, "Do what thou wilt," were a big influence on Page. Page bought the Boleskine house in 1971. A remote state on the shores of Loch Ness that Crowley used to own. This home wasn't like any other home. It was an old place where Crowley had done scary practices to call on supernatural beings. The mood at Boleskine House was scary and ominous, with stories of strange deaths and supernatural events. Legends in the area say that Crowley tried to call the 12 kings and dukes of hell to Boleskine House by performing a procedure. According to the Book of Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, this rite was broken up, which made Crowley think that he had let evil into our world by opening a doorway. Strange things kept happening after Crowley left the house. Sighs without bodies in the night, and ghostly forms walking around the grounds. Because Jimmy Page was so interested in Crowley and the occult, he couldn't help but be pulled to the house. There was more to Boleskine House than just living there. It stood for Page's link to the magical world he was interested in. People who visited Boleskine House while Page owned it said it had a bad energy, like Crowley's darkness was still there in every room. Page was still involved with the supernatural even after he bought a creepy, haunted house. People who were close to Page say that he did a secret routine with the members of Led Zeppelin to make sure that the band would be successful and last a long time. People say that this ritual happened in full secrecy, with only those who were involved knowing what happened and how strange it was. Page supposedly made a deal with mysterious forces in exchange for Led Zeppelin's huge success, according to rumors. That being said, this deal came with a high price. As the band was reaching the peak of their fame, a terrible chain of events began to happen. In 1975, Robert Plant and his family were on holiday on the Greek island of Rhodes when they were in a terrible car accident. Plant's car went off the road and crashed, breaking several bones, including those in his legs and feet. The accident was so bad that Plant had to stay in a wheelchair while he healed, which meant that Led Zeppelin had to stop their tour. What happened, though, was just the start of worse things to come. Plant got a terrible call from his wife Maureen in 1977, while Led Zeppelin was on tour in the United States. They told him that their 5-year-old son Karak had suddenly become very sick. Karak died a few hours later from a sickness that was not yet known, which made Plant feel very sad and forced him to step away from the public eye for a while. When John Bonham died in 1980, it was the last and worst blow to Led Zeppelin. He had been drinking a lot that day and then passed away at Jimmy Page's house in Windsor. He was found not breathing because he had choked on his own vomit while he was sleeping from drinking too much. It was impossible for the band to continue after Bonham's death because he was the drummer and was seen as the soul of the group. Despite all of these rumors and guesses, the news media kept making big deals out of Jimmy Page's interest in the supernatural. The news stories about his relationship with Aleister Crowley were often shocking, and some even said that Page had done evil practices and maybe even made a deal with the devil to become famous. The media loved writing about Page in relation to Boleskine House because of its creepy past and mysterious stories that surrounded it. They used it to show Page as a man who was obsessed with evil and occult practices. Because the media was looking closely at Jimmy Page, he decided to either keep quiet or respond in a very quiet way. He almost never refuted or confirmed the rumors directly, which made him even more mysterious and controversial. Page said that his interest in Aleister Crowley was part of his personal study of different parts of life and had nothing to do with worshiping the devil or black magic when asked about his relationship with the occult. Even though fans and the press were begging him to, Page also wouldn't say what the Zoso sign on Led Zeppelin 4 meant. This added to the mystery surrounding Page and added to the idea that he was an artist who was deeply interested in supernatural forces. The questions are still open, but one thing is for sure. The supernatural has cast a dark shadow over Jimmy Page's life and work, and it's still there. When people think of Led Zeppelin and the secret surrounding this famous band, they get chills. Page's connections to the occult, the secret practices, and the deadly curse will always be a part of the story of Led Zeppelin. A story that is controversial, mysterious, and spiritually interesting. Harmful relationships. Legendary in the world of rock music, Jimmy Page is known for both how great he is at playing the guitar and how complicated and contentious his personal relationships are. There are many bad things in Page's life, but the scandalous affair he had with 14-year-old Lori Mattix is one of the worst. During the 1970s, Lori Mattix was one of the most famous baby groupies in Hollywood. She became a sign of youth and a wild, hedonistic way of life. A group of young girls, most of whom were in their early teens, and Mattix started going to nightclubs on Sunset Strip on a daily basis. There, they met the biggest rock stars of the time. Rock stars over the age of 18 were very interested in these girls, many of whom were still young teens. Their rebellious lives and unchecked power let them get away with breaking moral rules. Famous baby groupie girls like Sable Starr and BB Buell were all looking for the attention of strong men in the rock music business. These girls were a mix of innocent beauty and rebellious spirit. When Mattix started dating Jimmy Page, she was only 14 years old. She quickly became deeply involved with the crazy and chaotic life of rock stars at the time. Many famous artists quickly became interested in her because of how beautiful she looked and how popular her style was in the 1970s. However, Page and Mattix's relationship was very controversial because they were very different ages and it was against the law. Page was a worldwide star at the time, and he was smitten not only by Mattix's young beauty, but also by her innocence and dreaminess. which he found easy to control and use against her. Page kept Maddox close without worrying about the legal or moral effects when they first started dating in secret. Maddox was often locked up in hotels or Page's private homes, and they only saw each other between shows. At first, she thought she loved Page, but she later realized the relationship was an abuse of power and that she had no say in her own life. Maddox felt lonely and alone because of this control, but she never went to court or openly criticized Page. But the truth about this connection left an indelible mark on Page's life, causing a lot of controversy and criticism. Jimmy Page was involved in a number of tense and public relationships. He also had a complicated and dark connection with Kenneth Anger, a filmmaker known for his supernatural and occult films. In the early 1970s, Anger met Page. Anger was an ardent follower of Aleister Crowley and a powerful figure in the occult world. They became close quickly because they were both interested in Crowley and magical practices. At first, their friendship was pretty good. For example, Anger asked Page to work with him on the movie Lucifer Rising, an occult-themed project that caused a lot of controversy. Page agreed to write the movie's music and even asked Anger to stay at Boleskine House, a famous house with a scary and mysterious past. But their partnership quickly fell apart because Page took too long to finish the movies, which made their relationship worse. Anger, whose personality was known for being unstable and scary, criticized Page in public and even said he had cursed Page and Led Zeppelin. Anger thought that this curse would ruin the band and take away Page's artistic skills. Not only do these bad relationships show how complicated and contradictory Jimmy Page is, but they also add to the problems that are already happening in his life. Page, a musical genius, has had to deal with the dark sides of his life, including situations that people still talk about and can't forget. Page has always been interested in supernatural and occult forces, and these stories show how complicated and troubled he is as a person. His ability and darkness have always gone hand in hand. These two sides have made a famous and controversial figure in rock music history. Jimmy Page is a rock music star who is known for both how good he is at playing the guitar and the complicated relationships he has in his personal life. The shocking affair Page had with Lori Maddox, a girl who was only 14 years old, is one of the worst things that has ever happened to him. Lori Maddox was one of the most well-known baby groupies in Hollywood in the 1970s. She became a sign of a wild and attractive young woman. Maddox and a group of girls, most of whom were in their early teens, started going to the nightclubs on Sunset Strip on a daily basis. There, they met the biggest rock stars of the time. Rock stars older than them became very interested in these girls, many of whom were still young teens, who ignored moral rules because they lived unruly lives and had unchecked power. Famous baby groupie girls like Sable Starr and BB Buell were all looking for the attention of strong men in the rock music business. These girls were a mix of innocent beauty and rebellious spirit. When Maddox started dating Jimmy Page, she was only 14 years old. She became deeply involved with the wild and hedonistic life of rock stars at the time. Many famous artists were immediately drawn to her because of how beautiful she was and how her clothes looked like they did in the 1970s. However, Page and Maddox's relationship was very controversial because they were very different ages and it was against the law. Page, by that time a famous person all over the world, was smitten not only by Maddox's young beauty but also by her innocence and dreaminess, which were easy for him to control and use against her. This connection started behind Maddox's back. Page used his power and influence to keep Maddox close, not caring about what the law or morals would say. Most of the time, Maddox was locked up in hotels or Page's private homes, and he only saw Page between shows. At first, she thought she was in love with Page, but she later saw that the relationship was just an abuse of power, where she didn't have any say in her life. Maddox felt lonely and alone because of this control, but she never went to court or openly criticized Page. The truth about this connection, on the other hand, left an indelible mark on Page's life, causing public outrage and harsh criticism. Jimmy Page had a lot of troubled relationships. He also had a complicated and dark connection with Kenneth Anger, a famous filmmaker who made movies about the supernatural and the occult. Page met Anger in the early 1970s. Anger was a devoted student of Aleister Crowley and a well-known figure in the occult world. They became close very quickly because they were both interested in Crowley and magical practices. At first, things were going well between them. Anger asked Page to work with him on the controversial movie Lucifer Rising, which was about occult practices. Page agreed to write the movie's music and even asked Anger to stay at Boleskine House, a famous house with a long history of witchcraft. But their work together quickly got worse because Page took too long to finish the music and their relationship ended. Anger, who was known for being unstable and spiritually charged, criticized Page in public and even said he had cursed Page and Led Zeppelin. According to Anger, this curse would ruin the band and stop Page from being creative. Not only do these bad relationships show how complicated and contradictory Jimmy Page is, but they also add to the problems that are already happening in his life. Page, a great musician, has had to deal with the dark sides of his relationships, which people still talk about and can't forget. In these stories, Page's interest in the supernatural and the occult is emphasized. They also show how complicated and troubled Page is as a person whose ability and darkness have always lived together. Both of these traits have made him a famous and controversial figure in rock music history. During the worst time of his life, he was stuck in a downward spiral of addiction and personal decline. He was once a sign of creativity and power in the world of rock music. Page became addicted to drugs, especially heroin and cocaine, just as Led Zeppelin was at the top of their game. He slowly fell deeper and deeper into a dark world as these drugs took over his life, taking him away from family and friends. Not only did Page's addiction ruin his physical and mental health, it also hurt his music business a lot. It got harder for him to do performances, and the habits that used to fuel his imagination seemed to have taken it away. The worst part of Page's personal fall was when Led Zeppelin's talented drummer John Bonham died in 1980. The day before Bonham died, he had drunk a lot while sleeping at Page's house and choked on his own puke. Bonham's death was not only a terrible loss for Page personally, but it was also the reason why Led Zeppelin had to make the painful choice to break up. The end of an important part in rock history was marked when the band said they couldn't go on without Bonham. When Page and Led Zeppelin broke up, her singing career seemed to stop. Many people thought that Kenneth Anger's curse had come true because he had a hard time making any good music for many years. Page tried to bring back the great days of Led Zeppelin with a number of different music projects, but he was never able to do so. Page's life was deeply affected by his personal decline and the effects of his addiction. He went from being a symbol of boundless creation to an artist stuck in the shadows. Jimmy Page, who is now 80 years old, lives a pretty quiet life in London, England. He isn't seen in public very often, but he still loves music and the supernatural, two things that have been a part of his life for decades. First, from 1986 to 1995, Page was married to Patricia Ecker. After that, from 1995, he was married to Jimena Gomez Paracha to 2008, and now he has a daughter and a boy. But he now lives a pretty quiet life, away from the attention he used to get. Even though he has been through a lot of bad luck and problems, Jimmy Page is still one of the best rock musicians of all time. Many fans are still curious about how he managed to stay alive, both physically and in his work. We still don't know if Jimmy Page really made a deal with the devil. What part did the supernatural play in his career and personal life's ups and downs? Even now, these questions are still a part of the Jimmy Page legend, which adds to the mystery and charm that surrounds him. A musical legend with natural ability and a long and interesting career, Jimmy Page has left an indelible mark on the history of rock. With classic hits, a huge musical legacy, and a lot of big accomplishments, like selling millions of records, winning Grammys, and being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Page changed the look of rock and roll and cemented his place as one of the best artists ever. He has stood strong as a symbol of unending creation, even though he has been through terrible tragedies, scandals, and even scary curses. Page is a legendary figure in the hearts of his fans because he lived and continued to have an impact, despite all the problems he faced. In the world of music, his work is seen as a sign of creativity and power. Glad you watched this movie. Make sure you subscribe to the station so you never miss more interesting stories about your favorite myths. Keep watching the next movie.